So I was brought into the president's office, and he said that I couldn't show manage my way out of a paper bag, that I was one of the worst employees they had ever had, and that he was going to fight me on unemployment.
She's leading with passion, bringing life to a vision, sharing a story, everyone listen, wind in her hair.
So today I'm talking with Bailey Beeken, president and founder of Validated Learnings, an events management company. Bailey is what I would call a super connector in business, and well, a whole lot more, as you'll see in our talk today. She knows how to see patterns in work and life and really knows how to connect the dots. And that is what we're going to be talking about today. Welcome, Bailey.
Thank you, Michelle. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm honored that you asked. And so I'm so glad to be here.
Oh, thank you so much for taking the time. So Bailey, as we get started, I would just love for you to talk to everyone a little bit about your background and what you do in your work.
Sure. I'm going to start kind of forward, which is what Validated Learnings does as an event or trade show or conference producer. So the company and what I've done for many, many years, when I've had my own companies, although I've worked in corporate settings as well, this is my third company, is we actually put up the money, so to speak, to when we find what we believe is a buyer and seller environment in B2B. And, we put all the investment into that and try and bring those people together, and we win or lose, right? And we love our communities, but at the end of the day, from a revenues perspective, that we're not just taking clients and they're paying us. That's actually doesn't, we're risking quite a bit to be able to see whether we can get both sets of clients together and they can have the kind of experience they want, so that we can keep reproducing that event. And I mention that because during our discussion, we're going to talk about probably a couple of things, but one is can be a very interesting part of anyone's journey, which is other people's money. Investors. And I don't mean big bank investors. The word entrepreneur almost is like way too big a word. I'm a small business owner. So when I look for investors, I'm looking for people, usually there's no corporate bank. I don't take loans. I'm looking for people who know me or have worked in this industry and have some sense of what I've done. So that's what I do today. And in producing these events, again, there are a lot of operational aspects and marketing and sales aspects we can absolutely get into if you're interested. But the main factor is we try and find and what I've done over the years, to your point, and trying to connect dots, is look at industries from the National Aardvark Association to reality TV. Where is there a white space where business buyer to seller in a B2B environment, where there may be at least a blue ocean to a red ocean, or at least a pink ocean, where I can put buyer and seller together and create a community so that event can keep going. Where I got to that is as most people, they don't wake up in the morning and say, oh, I want to sell. I want to, most people go to business school because they're not sure what they want to do. I didn't do any of that. I just left the house at around 18, had one semester of college. And so I liked making money, and I liked working. I just liked working. The book I want to write is I Learned Everything I Needed to Know About Business Waitressing, because really that's kind of what I did for a long time in bartending. And then, someone asked me and then I was a concert producer for 3 years I was a junior level person, but the senior level people booked the talent and they could see that I could do everything else. And they just gave me everything else, P&Ls, union contracts. I mean, and that was the training. Basically, I do the same thing now, except with events, right? So I did that for 3 years in New York City in 2,500 to 5,000 seat auditoriums. I learned how to market to consumers for it, et cetera, et cetera. And that ended in New York. It's a large major market. And at that time, we only had radio advertising and newspaper advertising that sold concerts. And we produced predominantly R&B and jazz. And the one radio station we relied upon, I woke up one day, went into work, turned it on, and it turned into a country music station. And we had 5 concerts running. And again, this was, I saw,
Wow.
this was an investment, just like we do. You know, they invested in buying the talent, renting the hall, all that money is expended in advance. And we had 7 concerts running and on that station, and we didn't get any refund for the advertising we bought. And
Wow.
that was the end of that company. So, and then I got asked to be a badge waitressing. Somebody just asked me from the table if I wanted to be a badge typist at an association that put on a very large convention at the time, the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers. And, you know, I just found the people side of the business. I really loved it. And I just kept moving around and trying different things. And, you know, and I moved, you know, I finally hit a wall. I guess I moved to different companies and became a show manager and all those things. And back in the 80s, there were not many women who were doing it. And I hit a glass ceiling and I went out on my own. I just couldn't get anywhere. And I came up with a very blue ocean idea and had to go find other people's money. And didn't know how to do that either. And but I knew people in the industry who would understand what I was trying to put together. I did not try and, you know, family and friends. I knew that I needed to push into the industry. I went to some of the largest companies and some of whom I'd worked for. I certainly even at that point had something of a reputation in the industry that I was in, which was trade shows and events. And they were like, "Oh, you're 28, aren't you cute? We're trying to put this together." And outdoor event. And I had a past, somebody who'd hired me, a very difficult gentleman who had run a very large trade show and sold it. And I needed a job. And that's a lot of my career is you will hear me preface it with, I needed a job.
Wow.
And I took it with him. He was so difficult to work with, but and we launched a show which ended up being my specialty launch because and that's how I started to understand how to identify blue oceans. Again, I needed a job and it was always the job no one wanted because it was high risk, a lot of failure, right, in launch. So people didn't want it. And so they kept putting it on my desk and I was like, okay, I need the job. I'll do it. And then I found that I loved it because it gave me an opportunity to really, do all the research, talk to people, what's going on? Is there a there? Do you need to know about something new? And so he had hired me. We had a terrible time. He wanted to launch something. I think it might have launched, but he had a really bad partner, which he didn't see at first. And so, I through all these experiences, I got to see, I feel like I had a front seat with a bag of popcorn to how businesses were run from inside out. I had very good fortune of coming up in a time when people had small companies and you could see how all the gears worked. And, but I went to him eventually. I knew he had quite a bit of money from the sale. And he just looked at me like one big dollar sign. I loved him for that. He looked at the plan. He heard, the pitch about the industry and he was like, I'm in, and it wasn't a small amount of money. He brought in 2 other partners because he didn't want to, first he was like, I'm in. And then he brought in 2 other partners, but that was very successful. We sold it 10 years later for, in the millions. So it was, and he was my mentor every day. He did not come into the office, but we were on the phone every day. He helped me with every contract, he was a great salesperson.
Wow.
He was a pain in the ass and, really kind of hard to work with, but much easier to be he was a much better partner than he was a boss. He had a great deal of respect for me. And eventually his daughter came to work in the business, who was also instrumental to its success. She was a very high powered lawyer. And she was like, I'm done. I don't want to be a lawyer anymore. I'll come work for you for $6.50 an hour.
Wow.
And we built that company together, really. And so, that's really, and then from there, I no longer had any fear. I went to work for corporations and doing similar things. Although sometimes, I ended up taking on a lot of roles, even within corporations, where they wanted to improve the margin, put together a package of shows. And I was usually that person they would bring on. Literally, they would have a contract for 2 to 3 years, put lipstick on the pigs and make everything good, but increase the margin so they could sell, which meant unfortunately being George Clooney and letting go of a lot of people and trying to make organizationally things happen. Within again, trade shows and conferences. But I say this to anyone who's thinking about being in business for themselves, if you're not risk tolerant, don't do it. You'll make yourself so sick. Once I had gone through my own business and seen how many times I could have failed, or I failed at things we tried and didn't end up doing, and losing some money and making money. I didn't set out to be risk tolerant, but it really gave me that. And it's very hard to be sitting at the helm every day, knowing you're responsible for people who work for you, and you have to keep taking risks. There's never a point. And even in my corporate jobs, I never thought of myself as an employee again. I only thought of myself as I am. They've given me this thing that I have to grow, change, do whatever. And I'm going to make, I always counted on the back end, because no one ever wanted to pay very well. I mean, they paid well, but a guy would have made, I don't know, 40% more, but I always built in the back end because I felt like it was a business. I knew I could do it.
Yep.
So
there were a couple things that I heard that I want you to just elaborate a little on. And the first one was when you talk about taking a risk. So it wasn't even just becoming an entrepreneur. You just said, which I think is really great for people to hear, that you took the job that other people didn't want because it was riskier, right? But you saw an opportunity and you just took it. And through that path of taking some jobs because you needed jobs, right? But you didn't necessarily take the safe one, and so I'm interested to see, like, what caused you to choose those particular jobs. Was there something? Because obviously, even though you say you're not risk averse, you are a risk taker. I believe it's a calculated risk, but I think I would tell people not to be afraid of taking risks, because there was a reason that you actually did take them. So I want to get into that just a little bit.
yeah, and if I misspoke, I think what I meant was, if you are someone who is risk averse,
Yes,
it can be really hard to be your own, to
be
form
your
a
own boss.
company. And to be totally involved in that, particularly if you have other people's money riding on it, right?
Yep.
So, because I never worried about my own money, I only worried about my partner's money, always. I mean, I worried about what of course I wanted to make what I wanted to make, but
Yep.
I was. Bill Gates said, I remember an interview with him from 100 years ago, and they said, well, I know you really want to, and you hear a lot of this in kind of TED Talks and things like that. I really wanted to be a success, and I believed in myself, or I found a way to believe in myself. And Bill Gates said, when they interviewed him, said, so you knew you were going to be a success, right? And he was like, no, I was terrified of failure every single day. Like somebody was going to eat my lunch. This was back when Microsoft was, and still is, the big powerhouse that it was. And I was like, as soon as he said it, I completely identified. I was just terrified of failure. And so that was the biggest driver for me. Why did I take those jobs? To be honest, they always paid more than what I would have made taking a safer job. And I felt capable. I just felt capable. I was like, I am willing to bet on myself. I hate to keep referencing people, but I've had so many great little mentors and big mentors.
Yeah.
One of my best friend's father told me when I was in my early 20s. And I was like, oh my God, I'm being offered something. And it wasn't even a big job, but it was more than I had ever done before. And I said, oh my God, I don't know. And I'm so nervous. And he said, can you do 10% of the job? And I said, yeah. Hands down. And he said, if you can do 10% of any job that you're being offered, you can do the whole job. And I will tell you again, anyone taking, that has never not been true for me. So I began a journey of just, saying, okay, what's the worst that can happen here? And what's the worst?
Gosh, so you're making me think about that Play Like a Man, Win Like a Woman book, but men seem to do a much better job of that, right? They're willing to put themselves out there for, very minimal qualification of a particular job that they believe, right? But I think as a woman, You're right. I look at my younger self in particular because I'm a risk taker. I have my own business. I have a lot of the same attributes that you do. I'm finding as through our conversations, but what I found is that when I was younger, in particular, I needed to be 98% plus there, right? For me, like I wanted to go in there, and here's what I would say to my younger self. What I would say is, I want to go in there and be completely truthful. And so I know that I can nail every single thing on this job. If I can't, I'm out, and but the reality is, that's not where you necessarily end up having the best opportunities for you and the ones that are, real exciting. When I opened my first business, I did an international franchise. I'm flying off to Italy, negotiating in Italian, which I really didn't know Italian, by the way. I spoke Spanish
Oh my
and
God.
French, and I'm reading all these contracts, and somehow I convinced them that I would be able to run this franchise in the Southeastern United States. And it was an amazing experience. I wasn't even 50% qualified, I'm sure, and I was in my 20s. But anyway, I'm curious to ask you about this. Did you always believe that you may go out on your own? Or was it something that, maybe you thought you were going to succeed, maybe you thought you wouldn't, I don't know. But, how did you make a decision to actually go out on your own? And what would you say are like really important things that you would want people to know, other than, if you're not risk averse, right? If they're thinking about it, what do they need to think about, right? If they're thinking about potentially going out on their own.
So I gave it no thought the first time. I so much I go back to of what I have done has been by default and not by design. I really didn't have a lot of design. I left school after, college after one semester. I would not have been voted most likely to succeed in high school. I didn't pay a lot of attention, and I wasn't there that much. I just, to me, experiences were the thing that was a thrill, the curiosity.
Wow.
We talked about that earlier, right? The thrill ride was not knowing what I was kind of getting into next. And I, again, had hit a glass ceiling. I was fired from a job in a nice company. I liked, having a paycheck. I had just bought a house, and, back when houses were affordable. And so I was fired, and I was fired summarily. I was fired. I learned a lot of things along the way. Even at that age, I was, as I said, 27, 28, but I'd already been working for quite some time. I'd been working, even in this industry, I think since I was about 21, 22. So what I didn't learn was how to evaluate whether I could do the job, whether what was put before me was doable, right? Big difference. I can do anything, but I can't do the impossible. And I hadn't yet been able to discern that. So I went to this company. They gave me the impossible. They gave me a list of over 25 shows they wanted launched. I asked for a budget on each one. I asked for all of the tools. Once I got hired, I didn't think to do it in advance. I just thought, I didn't know what I thought. I just was like, oh, okay, sure. I didn't know whether they wanted them launched in a year or over 3, and it turned out they wanted them launched all in 1 year with no budget. So I didn't quit. I was like, okay, let me give this a try, right? And I was failing miserably, needless to say. So I was brought into the president's office, and he said that I couldn't show manage my way out of a paper bag, that I was one of the worst employees they had ever had, and that he was going to fight me on unemployment because of, right? So I fought back. I did get unemployment, but I learned a very hard lesson that I did no longer ever went in looking at a corporate job again without asking a lot. I was interviewing them, and I know that's scary. I go back to when you say about how women, sometimes we go in, we start our lives with a lot of perfectionism versus can I do 10% or 98%, right? We also, a lot of people have fear, men and women, when they go in, they cannot interview the company. They are so worried about themselves about making sure that they're giving the right answers. They're not listening to see, am I going to be successful? Do I have a shot at being successful? And what would people do? So I had nothing, I had no place to go.
Yeah.
And a girlfriend of mine who had just been hired by a magazine in the shipping industry saw an opportunity. She saw blue ocean. Not, sorry for the pun. The Exxon Valdez had the oil spill, and everything, all ships had to be retrofitted. And so in the shipping industry, that was a huge thing. No one knew anything about it. They didn't know anything about the regulations. This was back when even credit cards weren't used that much to register.
Mhm.
She said, I think there's an opportunity here for a conference. And I knew how to do that. And I said, okay, we both put up $250 each, and we did everything by hand. And people were literally, the day of the conference, throwing money at us to get in through the doors,
Wow.
because it was that hot a topic. I made $17,000. I
Wow.
had not made $17,000, my own money, right, from a conference ever. And I was hooked. I was like, never again. And it wasn't because I dislike companies. For me, money is a big motivator. And I was like, this is boss. And I then began looking, I saw an article in the New York Times about miniature golf and family fun centers, and it gave a number of how many there were. And I, again, doing launch, I said, oh, okay, there may be a there. And I did some research, and next thing you know, we launched the Fun Expo, the miniature golf and family fun center. And it happened to be, we hit it at the right time. They were just starting to expand these indoor ball crawl family fun centers. And, we just hit a vein. And, I ran that for the next 10 years. So, that little experience, that tiny little risk. And by the way, that $250 at that time for me was huge. I was really living hand to mouth, waitressing on the weekends. I mean, I cannot tell you, that was like, we were both, but I remember stuffing envelopes on her floor at 1 a.m. Like, people tell stories like that, but honest to God, there is nothing about starting a business that is glamorous, that is fun, that is easy, that is, if someone thinks they're going to have a better work-life balance, do not. It is that is not part of the equation. So
No, it's not, as one business owner to another. So let me ask you this question. You have been very successful in scaling your business. I mean, what, your particular business, 8 years or so?
this is now 10 years. And
10 years. And among other things, I know you hold the title of largest events and conference services for senior living, which is a $92 billion industry in the United States. You're a very noted authority, well-known figure across various industries. And, you really did connect so many dots to get you to where you are today. And what I wanted to get into was this, which is kind of a complex question, is, for leaders, you don't have to own your own business. For people in their work, in their life, how do you begin to see what patterns might look like, or how do you understand, I know there's a whole thing about blue ocean, but if we just look at patterns, dot connecting, and understanding how you find and understand opportunities that could be there. What is it that you do? It sounds like you educate yourself, but really, is it something that people can learn, looking at patterns, looking at connecting dots? Is it, I think it's like a superpower of yours, because, like, let's face it, if you can see patterns and connect dots the correct way, there's nothing you cannot conquer in this world, right? So I'm curious to see how you learned to do that. And is it something that's always been a part of what you do? And was any of it intentional?
So it is a complicated, or kind of a couple multi-part question, but one, the industry, the work that I learned, was trained to do, again, not just launching, but just the conferences, trade shows in the business to business world. We had to, if we were in it, not launching it, or launching. And in my early experience, there was a lot of launching. So everybody was, there was just a lot of opportunity. Things were changing, technology, et cetera, back in the mid 80s to the early 90s. Not to date myself, but I shall. So people were throwing stuff up against the wall all the time. But so we had to learn every industry really quickly, from soup to nuts. We figured about 8 weeks to really read the back then trade journal. I would go to the New York Public Library. Because my office was on 38th Street, and I would spend 2 or 3 days if I was being thrown into Unix Expo or Accountant's World or whatever. And I would read everything in the get up to speed to that minute and you read all this stuff and you start to see what are people talking about right then and there. Right. So again, I am curious. I love the news. If somebody asks me what I do every day, I get up and I read 5 newspapers every morning before I even get out of bed. I'm not a doom scroller, but I have to know the news from a bunch of different angles. Right. So does it help me in what I do today and Smash, the show that I run? A little bit. Sometimes I'll see an article about senior care, but it's just that curiosity about like what's going on. We were talking earlier about supply chains and all of that. It all impacts every business in some way. And so how am I synthesizing that information and putting it into what I'm working on or the people I'm working with? Right. So I think, you and I talked about that, just having an innate curiosity. But I think I'm going to jump ahead to say, to somebody who's younger or starting their career, even mid-career, the very best spot to learn, to begin to synthesize information in a holistic way is from a sales perspective. If you've not been in a sales job, if you have not, been in a sales department, because it is the one place. So remember, I'm sorry, I'm stuttering a little. Earlier, I said I had the good fortune of coming up when there were small companies, when no matter what you did, you could see how everything fit together. And once you can do that, you can take that information, you're in the retail industry, right? Yeah. And you start to really know the industry, or the fashion industry. You really know how buyers operate. I mean, no, I'm not in the fashion industry, but you really begin to learn about the industry. But to really learn about how you synthesize all of the pieces, sales is that place. You see how the money comes in, the revenue, how it gets spent, how your products get served up, how long it takes to get them served up, who you have to deal with operationally. Like that makes a huge difference in being able to scale, your idea and think, okay, how is this going to, okay, it's a great idea. People just always say to me, oh, like I have a lot of ideas and I don't know if it's a small package or a big package, but I cannot help my brain from saying, oh, did you try this? Let's do that. And people say, oh my goodness, you shouldn't talk about your ideas. Oh my God, someone's going to steal them. And I'm like, no one will ever steal my idea because no one will execute. No one executes. And they don't execute for, a couple of reasons. One is fear of failure, I think. 2 is capital. Capital is, you can never underestimate the power of capital and resources. In today's world, especially because resources can be very expensive because they're technology. They're not just people. So, but the third, I think, important thing is they don't know the whole package. Like, how do you put together that P&L and really know what you're risking? Because you haven't seen all of it, right? You're really guessing, you're putting your finger in the wind. We all do when we're starting something new, but if you know how the whole thing works, you can see where the train tracks are getting off the rails. I go back to, I would suggest to anybody who's either thinking about going out on their own or really wants to move up in the corporate world as a leader and as somebody who can sit at that table with confidence, and however they're serving that company. And it is, we are all up being of service to the communities we serve, within a work world, the communities we serve, the clients we serve, the companies we work for, you really have to understand how it all fits together. Yeah. It's the only way to synthesize information and to hear it and be able to be a confident voice. I hear what you're saying about the operational difficulty. Let me just, can you listen for a minute from my client's point of view? Is there any way we can tighten this up? Like sitting at a table in a corporation, being able to say that with absolute certainty is an enormous talent and many people have it, and some people don't, just because in today's world, the jobs are so bifurcated.
Oh yeah, they are,
It's
aren't they?
hard to see
Yeah.
all the parts. Sales, you get to see it all, the good, all how all the sausage is made.
That's a great plug for sales, Bailey, because I also as you were talking, I was thinking about CEOs and I was thinking about senior leaders, and even if it's only been a few years, they have cut their teeth on sales. So
Absolutely. I say
many of
that all the
them.
time. I
Yeah,
say, where do most CEOs come from? They definitely had a fairly, some base in sales.
yep,
Every single one, every single, unless you're like head of HR or head of
right.
a CFO. Those are
Yep,
the only two that don't. Everybody else has
yep,
sales.
you're right. Okay, so I wanted to ask you about this because you are from the moment I had my very first phone call to you, and then when I met you the first time in person, I'm just saying, okay, this woman has found her place. You are extremely passionate about what you do, and I define passion. I'm going to ask you to define it because when I think about it, and I'm thinking about you in particular, saying you love what you do, you're convicted that what you're doing is the right thing, and you're always looking to innovate and make it better. Um, a lot of people will say, there's no space for passion at work. Passion is what I have for my family. I've had C-levels say that they don't think passion is the right word to describe what they do. They're disciplined, they're dedicated. Um, but I guess I spend so much time at work like you do. I want to love it every day. So I just want to, ask you uh, to kind of talk to us a little bit about how you keep yourself, you know, impassioned with what you do, what motivates you. And because sometimes, right, business can be tough. We're in a tough business environment now, and you've got team that you've got to inspire and keep, on the same path that you are with keeping moving forward and not being discouraged sometimes. I know we're dealing with that with major sales organizations. So I would love to just, have you talk to us a little bit about your definition of passion and how you keep your passion alive for you in your work every day.
So it's an interesting word, passion, because I think it's a double-edged sword. I talked to you about this, that sometimes passion can get us into trouble because we think, oh, if I just had that yarn store, because I love to knit, it's all going to be good, right? And for me, that's not the kind of passion that I believe drives people within their jobs, whether it's corporate job, their own, if they go out on their own. So in the last episode of Succession, which I know many of your viewers will identify for those, and I'm sorry if it's a spoiler alert, but Tom Wambsgans, who's a very corporate, empty suit, whatever anybody asks him, the fellow who's kind of interviewing him for whether he's going to be CEO of the new company. And he doesn't even really know he's being interviewed. And he's asked, what kind of employee is he? And he says, I'm a grinder. And as soon as he said that, I thought, he described other things, but that word grinder, and I thought, yep, that'd be about right. So I get up in the morning, I don't go to work, I get to go to work. I am allowed to have this opportunity, right? And I don't say I wake up like highly grateful every morning, but I do get the difference. I'm not going to work, I'm getting to go there. And also I am passionate about my customers, my customers and my community, whatever community. Again, I've worked in jewelry. Whatever that community looks like, I am passionate about serving that community. That is my job. My job is not to get the right hotel. It's not, all of that is a byproduct of serving the community and wanting to make sure that every single customer has a phenomenal experience for what I sell and experience. That's what, some people sell widgets, I sell experience. So, and nobody wants the same experience twice. So I have a lot of thinking to do every year about how to, if I don't even call it up the game, change the game so that it's exciting it delights and surprises, right? So, and there's a lot of fun in that. And so I have said to people, part of the thing that I bring to work every day and why I enjoy it, or why, I don't know if the word is passion, but why I get up in the morning and go, I get to go to work today, is I love exploiting my competencies. Right. I get to, as a leader in a when I was running larger portfolios, or this is my third company, I get to exploit. We talked earlier about wanting to have more time through ChatGPT, to have that time to do what we love, right? We love thinking about the new idea, about how would we execute that, and over years, you do get the information you need to be able to really think something through and say, oh, I got to, plan R. And when we get to R, it's just, sorry, it's not going to work. Or, or wow, I got all the way to Z. Let's give this a try, or however our process works. But, I say to people, be passionate about your competencies, because I didn't like jewelry. I worked in that portfolio for 4 years. I have a little on, but like the people who were in that community were absolutely passionate artists about jewelry. I got it. I got their passion. I understood their needs, and my job was to serve them. It wasn't to love. It wasn't to be passionate about their product per se. It was to be passionate about them. And I think for all of us, if we can bring that sense of service into the work that we do, it's no longer about choosing family as passion over work. It's really, it's a place we get to serve, and it's a place we get to, really, people talk about, self-care and loving yourself. Well, there's no better way to love yourself than, getting to experience your competencies in a positive way. Is that okay?
Yeah, that is so interesting. So I heard a couple things there, and the one is around really mindset. So you said from the time you wake up, the first thing you said that resonated with me was, oh, I got to get up and go to work, or, oh, I get to go to work today. Just that, it's just, it's funny because I talk to my, teenagers today, and children, they're a little bit different. I think the inundation of social media has some impact on that. But I look at my daughter every day and I'm like, okay, so wait a minute. Why is everything in your life a grind? Everything you got the face. I'm like, come on, you're 20 now. You're 20. You got the world, you really, it's a good world for you. You're at a good place. But it's the mindset from the time you get up, I think, and face your day. But when do you know when maybe it's just time to walk away? Is there a time? I think about people that say, I'm staying in this job because I need the security of that job, and I've got a family. And you see people that are in their own grind of life. But how do you take that first step of understanding, right? Maybe you feel you have to be risk averse. For those around you, who knows? But how can you begin to think about taking the first step of understanding when it's time to make a change, or time to change your mindset?
I have 2 kids in my mid-20s, and they certainly don't have I get to go to work mentality yet. So they don't get there in a couple of years either. I mentioned Tom Webscan is this grinder, and what I didn't say is I grind every day. Like, one of my sayings that everyone hates in my family is, why do you think they call it work?
Yeah.
Like, you have to get over that. Like everyone's going to go in and grind every day. And so find those places and spaces where it's your happy place of grinding, right? Like that's, hopefully, but that does take time, and it takes a lot of experiences. So the one thing I would say is it's hard to know when it's time. My corporate jobs typically had a shelf life. Mm-hmm. And I really ended up liking choosing those jobs, because I was a 2.5 to 3 year corporate person. Like I marveled at people who could stay at a company for 10 or 15 years. I did not know how in the world they could do it, because the politics of all of that was always way out. That was just, I couldn't. People can do it. I couldn't. because I believed what I believed. I was opinionated, and, if something wasn't going to work, I was going to go in and say, look, you've been, whatever, because again, I didn't think I worked for them. I felt like I worked for myself. But like everyone who, I was the primary breadwinner. I had 2 kids. I had a very supportive husband, but I was afraid financially many times. But because I had these shelf dates, I had to begin early before leaving, thinking about the next thing. And, that's where networks become enormously, like if you are not building your network every single day of the people and creating relationships with them, not because they are going to give you a job, but because they can just help you move the next inch towards something that you don't even know may be available or out there. I just can't stress that enough. So every day, no matter how locked into a job you feel, every person you speak with, whether they're 20 years old and starting their career or retiring next year, again, if you're in service to people, you are going to have the attitude of, I love talking to you. You are so interesting. And I may need to tap you for more information. Would you mind if I link in? Because, or however you want that. But LinkedIn is my God of, keeping track of people.
Me too.
Right. So, and even today, my kids also now understand that LinkedIn is one of the most important business tools there is, right? For just that. And I am really trying to stay out of their lives, but I'll tell you, their work lives, but I say this all the time. You had to talk with that person? Did you link in with them today? Because that network is key. And also, I understand the fear. But I also was pushed, not pushed out. I actually wasn't fired that much, but I had a date stamp. And so, a lot. Or actually right before I got into senior housing, I was working on a show that was insane. It was for reality TV. I can't even go into it, except there were 2 entire full page articles, one in the New York Times and one in the Los Angeles Times, that said it was after it had been produced, and I produced it, but was a miasma. It was so bad. It was so wrong. It was everything about it. And I kept pleading with them from when I started the job to please cancel this thing. There was no way that this could work. Not with the budget. It was a business to consumer show, which was also not my expertise. So I don't want to blame them entirely. The boss was, I can't even begin to describe how abusive the situation and toxic the situation was. And I finally said, I was in my maybe late 40s, early 50s. And I said, this is it. I cannot be handed a show anymore that is in an industry that I'm either, to be honest, too old for. I can't walk around a show of technology geeks that are 28 years old. I'm not going to be heard or seen in a way that may be productive. Not anything against them. I just was realistic. And I think that's a really important thing, is to be, just keep grounding yourself, reading about what people do, looking at all of your talents, the things you like to do, the things you can at least grind through, and just go to Glassdoor, go to every place you can look to see what else may be a possibility if you want to change what you do or you've got to do research. Like there's no way around looking. And so I made some decisions. I wasn't going to work in a company that was going to hand me a show. I wasn't going to work in an industry where I couldn't build a rapport with the people. I really wanted to do something, not that I was necessarily passionate about, but an industry that I could love, like my fun people, my fun expo people. I knew their dogs, their children, like I knew everybody. And I loved it on their behalf. I didn't really like amusement parks that much, but I loved them on their behalf because they were passionate people. And that is an exciting group to work with. So I found I had not had to look for a job from an ad in years. And in those days, well, not even that long ago, I saw this little ad for a conference producer in senior living. And my father had been through that process. I knew a little tiny bit about it. And to be honest, I thought if I get this job, and it was a way step back. Like I was running large $40 million divisions. They were asking for a conference producer, which is not a terrible job, but it's a 25-year-old's job. And I
Okay.
thought
Mhm.
at that point, I still needed to earn a decent income, but I could step back a little bit on the money. And
Mhm.
I just bet on myself. And I said, if I do this and it works and it's what I think it is, which is an industry I can understand. I'm at an age where I can probably age into it comfortably. Better things will, not better, but bigger money will come, like I will be okay. And that's exactly what happened. I worked for a company for 3 years that did conferences for CEOs.
Mhm.
They wanted a new launch. They did not hire me right away. They did not want someone from New York. They did not want a
Huh.
professional conference producer. They had not had good experiences with that. So it took 11 interviews to sell them on me. I had to finally, after a lot of discovery during
Mhm.
all these interviews and dinners, and they were very about the culture and their people, right? Were they going to be a fit? And I finally heard the thing that I needed to hear to close the sale, so to speak. And
Wow.
it was and it was great. And I knew from the start, the people were so passionate in this industry. I was like, this is it. I love it. It's interesting. I could do whatever. They wanted me to launch a show. They wanted me to run some shows. I was happy to do it. Happy to, again, the risk of stepping way back.
Yeah.
I was just, because I had made a decision, and it worked. I didn't know whether it was going to work, but it worked.
That's really interesting. So I'll just tell you briefly about a story of mine, which is so I owned that international franchise that I was talking to you about, and I did that for about 12 years and sold it. And when I was deciding what to do next, now this was back in the early 2000s, and it was, let's see, it was like yeah, early 2000s. And anyway, what happened was when I'm going out to interview and I'm talking to recruiters, they're like, well, we don't really know what you did. You can say whatever you did. I'm like, but I had all these retail stores and I did this, that. And they're like, well, yeah, but if you're looking at corporate, because what I had decided was I wanted to, I did the same thing that you did. I started printing out LinkedIn descriptions of jobs. I started looking at different areas, different resources, and putting them in piles because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And what I realized was that I wanted to take all of my experience in retail, which was really small business, right? So I did everything from had a distribution center, retail channels, retail stores, but also other franchises. And so I wanted to take that experience and apply it as a consultant because consulting, I realized I really loved. And so I took a job with a company and with a corporation doing just that, small business solutions for a national financial services company, one of the larger ones out there. And I did that for a few years. And because of that, oh, and by the way, I took the opportunity with them and I took it for less money than, oh my gosh, when I started consulting with Accenture, like back in the 90s, right? I'm like, are you kidding me? But okay, I took it and I had been offered another job by someone that I had consulted with in the past, and it was for a lot more money. But this was small business solution consulting, getting me close into where I wanted to go. So I took the lower paying job. And lo and behold, that is what led me to um, being introduced by someone at that company to someone who owned, well, the company I'm with now, Sales Globe, and said, you know what, this person, the founder of the company, the managing partner, he wants to scale, and I think he needs to meet you. And I'm a partner here. And so I'm back to owning my own business. I'm back to consulting, and it's all in sales, all the things that I love. So you can, by looking at things, understanding what your likes are, what you are good at, right? Was I really drawn to financial services? No, but I knew that I wanted to get into consulting and I wanted to leverage my experience in the small business world.
Mhm.
So, that's what we did, brought solutions to people that banked with them, right? So it was all about that. So anyway, I just thought I'd share that story because
No, I think it's, again, I think, as risk is as much as big risk as, I don't want to say smaller risk. Look, making less money with my kids heading off to
it's a
college
big deal.
was a big deal. And you know what? I sat down with the family and I said, this is how it's going to go. I don't know if this is going to work, but the president's nickname that I was working with, Mad Dog, just so I can tell you how insane psychotic he was. I don't have to give you his name. His nickname was Mad Dog. No one referred to him as anything else. I was like, I can't do Mad Dog. And the other characters there, I can't do it. And I've got to move forward into something that's going to carry me longer. Hopefully this is it. So here's how, well, I think we're going to have to rein in this and that. And, I don't know, like they were used to me taking risks, I guess, at that point. And I'd done okay. I failed a lot. I just want to keep saying that I failed a lot. If failure,
me too.
What I started didn't end up the way I wanted, or I had to pivot again, I will tell you that, I don't really look, I don't like that word failure. I didn't fail. None of that was failure. It was just the next thing, they were just obstacles to overcome. They were just challenges. They weren't like challenges to be met. They were like, oh, blank.
Right.
I got to figure it out. I got to get with my network of people who don't even know me that well. They owe me nothing, right? Except we've had a conversation. I cannot tell you how many times someone I barely spoke to once is the catalyst, right, for the next introduction. The people who love me and know me, not that they don't want to do something, but they just don't have anything to help me with.
Right.
On the other hand, I've had people who've worked with me who very closely, who've been like, oh my God, you've got to get her for the next job. So I just go back to networking. Don't stop. Don't ever stop. There is no one who might not be able to help you. And it's not just about that, like checking out their credentials and do I want them? What could I do for them? Would I be of service to them? I have never turned down a request for someone who wanted to just have a chat. I have never tried, if I can, I have put something forward because it is about paying it forward. Always. Always.
So that is a good segue into something I wanted to talk about with your work. Right now, we're in challenging economic times, and I am talking to companies that are slashing budget. What I really wanted to get into, you talked about networking, but I want to talk about, when we think about return on investment of your people, right? A lot of times we look at the cost side of things, and that's the first thing that goes, but we don't look at the impact of the investment. So for example, we have a communication practice, and one of the things that I've learned is that on average, companies that don't have a good communication plan, it's been quantified that it's over $12,000 per employee. You can take it and multiply it across your employees. That's what your revenue opportunity cost is that's lost because of poor communication. I want to talk about events and conferences, the type of things that you do that are really intended to bring people together to network and expand, relationships with their peers, which, by the way, is why I started this podcast. And, what are like these, when people are being told they can't go, how should leaders look at an investment in a conference or an event? And how as individuals can you, manager or leader, and then how as you and an individual work with your organization on, just getting the ability to go?
There are a couple of things that I've heard people do. So interestingly, for myself, right, I have my own association, Society of Independent Show Organizers.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with
go.
And I've been a member on and off for years and years, one of the founding members. And I think I mentioned I sold my company last year. So I don't know what's going to happen. I'm gainfully and happily with Smash, but things change. So I've learned to get ready to pivot. And also I hadn't touched base with those people for a long time. Mm-hmm. I would say all in, it was about $3,500, maybe $4,000 to make that investment between flying, hotel, registration fee, all of the things. And it was pinched, right? But I know that the investment in that, being seen, speaking up, talking to people I haven't spoken to in a long time, telling them where I was at, what had happened with my company, what I may plan to do. It didn't pay off. No one offered me a new job or, said, oh my God, but I know that that will pay off, not just for me, but what I learned there, right, by going all the sessions, was some great new ideas for Smash. So I chose to pay for that myself. The company would not have, but I'm in a position to do that. Yep. Here's the thing about conferences. One of the main things I would say to anybody who wants, who thinks it's important, find out what the company goals might be behind a conference like that, and see if you can align what you're going to do there very specifically with the company's goals, and try and quantify that. A lot of people are like, hey, but it's great, I meet all these people. I am never not surprised. I am always surprised. Let me put it that way. I'm always surprised at how little planning actually goes into attending a conference or a trade show or any kind of mixed event. Even if you're going to an evening reception with your peers. Like I do, it sounds a little cold, perhaps callous. I don't know how you want to say it. I do not go to any industry event, whatever industry I'm in, if I, wherever I'm going for work, without a game plan, some kind of game plan. Now, I may not accomplish one of the things that I want to set out, but I will tell you, by knowing what I want to get done, whether it's shaking the hands of 5 people who I don't know, whether there's one person at that event I'm going to meet, no matter what, if it takes me 10 people to get me to that person, and a bigger show, I may want to look at something organizationally or something for inspiration. I may need to speak to 3 companies. Like I do a lot of homework, and I think the people who do that, whether they're deciding to sponsor an event or whether, so we have, as I said, a bespoke selling method right now. Because there's no trade show floor, we have to work with every sponsor on what do they really want to accomplish. And so we force them into really thinking about it. There are 5 conversations around, do you want more branding? Do you want more customer interaction? Like, here's what we have, here's what might work for you. Your company is this size. But same thing for attending. Like, what does your organization feel you can get out? First you go figure out what you think your organization can get out of it. How do you quantify that? And then report back. Because I'll tell you this, the next time you ask to go someplace and they know you've taken on that responsibility and that you've accomplished some, or, and you can give some dollar value to it at the end, they're going to say yes. And I will say, I know I've been doing this a long time and I'm biased, but there is nothing like face-to-face, nothing can, especially in these times, where everything is technology, even Zoom, which is, to be honest, I'm so glad for Zoom because we get to see each other again. Yeah. That whole 15 years where all we did was, email, and I didn't know what you looked like except on LinkedIn. Right. I didn't know any different, but now that we can see each other and talk, I mean, it's just better. And then face-to-face tops that, because things come out from people and they talk about things. I always say it's the in between the sessions chatter. It's sitting at the bar afterwards, whether you drink or not, and talking to your peers about things that they open the kimono a bit, and it makes life easier. It makes networking easier. It makes picking up the phone easier, whatever that looks like for the company. And, I don't think anything replaces it on the one hand. On the other hand, there are events that are very poorly run. Like any other industry, we have, I don't want to say charlatans, but people who are not as customer centric. Some are really customer centric and they do everything to make sure that everybody gets what they need, and some are not. And so you also have to do I think, again, research. You have to really determine whether there's enough there to make it worth your while or your company's while.